countries in a different part of the world, such as Africa.
So as the situation keeps on going and becoming dire with every passing day, OSCE chairman in office, Zbigniew Rau, headed to Moscow after more than a dozen nations urged their citizens to leave Ukraine. And the United States are saying that aerial bombardments could begin, quote, at any time. Russia holds that a diplomatic solution is still possible.
Today in Moscow, the head of Polish diplomacy, Zbigniew Rau, began talks with the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov. The visit is related to Poland's presidency of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Although the main reason is the tense Ukrainian crisis, Rau proposed an initiative for a new dialogue on European security within the OSCE. Its purpose is to reduce the risk of confrontation. The diplomat emphasized that he was counting on Russia's involvement in this project. During a press conference after the meeting, Sergei Lavrov announced that the trust among OSCE countries is at a record low.
Odnośnie do kryzysu wokół Rosji i Ukrainy. Od samego początku tego kryzysu mówiłem jasno i cały czas powtarzałem, że Stany Zjednoczone są gotowe niezależnie na to, co się wydarzy. Jesteśmy gotowi, jeżeli chodzi o obranie ścieżki dyplomatycznej, aby zaangażować się właśnie w takie rozwiązanie wraz z naszymi sojusznikami i partnerami, aby zagwarantować bezpieczeństwo i stabilizację w Europie, ale jednocześnie jesteśmy gotowi na odpowiedź zdecydowaną, że dojdzie do ataku Rosji na Ukrainę, który nadal jest bardzo możliwy. Uwzględniając ostatnie wydarzenia z ostatnich tygodni i miesięcy, to było nasze podejście cały czas i pozostaje tym podejściem również obecnie. Także dzisiaj chciałbym Amerykanom powiedzieć, jak wygląda sytuacja na miejscu odnośnie do kroków, które podjęliśmy, od działań, do których jesteśmy gotowi podjąć i co tak na dobrą sprawę, o co toczy się gra dla nas, dla całego świata i jak może to wpłynąć na nas tutaj w Stanach. Przez ostatnie tygodnie wraz z partnerami i sojusznikami moja administracja była zaangażowana w szereg rozmów w zasadzie dyplomacji, która trwa 24 godziny na dobę. W tym tygodniu rozmawiałem z prezydentem Putinem, aby jasno mu powiedzieć, że jesteśmy gotowi, aby utrzymać dyplomację na wysokim poziomie, a to wszystko po to, aby dojść do porozumienia z Rosją wraz z partnerami i sojusznikami, aby odpowiedzieć na zagadnienia dotyczące bezpieczeństwa, jeżeli tego chce. Ponieważ są takie zagadnienia bezpieczeństwa również po naszej stronie. Prezydent Putin i ja zgodziliśmy się, że nasze zespoły powinny kontynuować dalsze rozmowy wraz z naszymi partnerami, sojusznikami z Europy. Zaledwie wczoraj rząd rosyjski publicznie zaproponował kontynuację dyplomacji. Ja się z tym zgadzam. Dyplomacja powinna mieć szansę, aby odnieść rzeczywiście sukces i uważam, że naprawdę są sposoby na to, aby odpowiedzieć na te zagadnienia bezpieczeństwa. Stany Zjednoczone przedstawiły konkretne pomysły i rozwiązania po to, aby stworzyć właściwe środowisko bezpieczeństwa w Europie i jednocześnie zaproponowaliśmy nowe środki kontroli zbrojeń, nowe środki przejrzystości działania, nowe środki stabilizacji działań i wszystkie te środki dotyczą wszystkich stron, zarówno NATO, jak i Rosji. Dlatego też chcemy podjąć właściwe działania zorientowane na jeden wspólny cel po to, aby zwiększyć poziom naszego bezpieczeństwa. Na pewno nie poświęcimy naszych podstawowych wartości. Kraje i narody mają prawo do integralności terytorialnej i do suwerenności, ale również do wolności. Do wolności również do tego, jak też robić. Dzisiaj Ministerstwo Obrony rosyjskie powiedziało, że część wojska wycofuje się z terytorium przy Ukrainie. Byłoby dobrze, gdyby tak było, ale jeszcze nie mogliśmy tego potwierdzić. Nie mogliśmy też potwierdzić, jakoby te oddziały rzeczywiście wycofywały się do swoich baz. A według naszych analiz natomiast dalej są na stanowisku dość niebezpiecznym dla Ukrainy. Obecnie ponad 150 000 żołnierzy otoczyło Białoruś i teoretycznie też Ukrainę i jest głównie wzdłuż granicy z Ukrainą. Dlatego inwazja jest bardzo prawdopodobna. Dlatego też poprosiłem wielokrotnie, aby wszyscy Amerykanie, którzy są obecnie na Ukrainie, opuścili ten kraj teraz, zanim będzie za późno, aby w sposób bezpieczny ten kraj opuścić. Stąd też tymczasowo przenieśliśmy naszą ambasadę z Kijowa do Lwowa na zachodniej części Ukrainy, blisko granicy z Polską. I mówiliśmy jasno Amerykanom i też całemu światu odnośnie do do planów Rosji. I powaga tej sytuacji jest znacząca, aby każdy wiedział i widział, co się dzieje. Podzieliliśmy się tą wiedzą, którą mamy i tym, co robimy w tej sprawie. I chciałbym jasno również powiedzieć, czego nie robimy. Stany Zjednoczone i NATO nie są zagrożeniem dla Rosji. Ukraina nie jest zagrożeniem dla Rosji. Ani Stany, ani NATO nie mają pocisków rakietowych na Ukrainie i nie mamy planów, aby je tam mieć. Naszym celem nie jest naród rosyjski. Nie chcemy doprowadzić do destabilizacji Rosji. Zwracając się do obywateli Rosji, nie jesteście naszym wrogiem. I nie wierzę, że nie chcecie krwawej, destrukcyjnej wojny przeciwko Ukrainie z ludźmi, z którymi wiąże was bardzo dużo, jeżeli chodzi o więzy rodziny, kulturę i historię. 77 lat temu nasi obywatele walczyli ramię w ramię, aby zakończyć najgorszą wojnę w historii. Druga wojna światowa była wojną z walki na pewną konieczność, ale jeżeli Rosja zaatakuje Ukrainę, to będzie wojna z wyboru, wojna bez powodu. I mówię to nie po to, aby sprowokować, ale powiedzieć prawdę, ponieważ prawda jest istotna. Przewidywalność jest istotna. Jeżeli Rosja doprowadzi do inwazji w ciągu następnych dni bądź tygodni, koszty ludzkie po stronie Ukrainy będą ogromne, a koszty strategiczne dla Rosji będą tym większe. Jeżeli Rosja zaatakuje Ukrainę, spotka się z ogromnym potępieniem międzynarodowym i świat nie zapomni, że Rosja wybrała drogę niepotrzebnej śmierci i destrukcji. Inwazja Ukrainy będzie ogromną raną. Stany Zjednoczone i nasi sojusznicy i partnerzy odpowiedzą w sposób zdecydowany. Zachód jest zjednoczony i działa wspólnie. Nasi sojusznicy z NATO i sojusz jako taki jest tak zdeterminowany i tak zjednoczony, jak jeszcze nigdy nie był. Źródłem naszej siły jest przede wszystkim nasze uniwersalne podejście i nasze wspólne wartości demokratyczne, które nas łączą, ponieważ tu chodzi o coś więcej, nie tylko o Rosję i Ukrainę. Tu chodzi przede wszystkim o reprezentowanie tego, w co wierzymy. Tu chodzi o przyszłość dla naszego świata. Tu chodzi o wolność. Tu chodzi też o prawo do tego, aby kraje miały prawo wyboru własnego losu, ale jednocześnie, aby ludzie mogli decydować o swojej przyszłości. I dany kraj nie może zmieniać granic sąsiada siłą. I to jest nasza wizja. Jestem przekonany, że ta wizja, ta wolność będzie tym, co zwycięży, jeżeli Rosja odpowie w inny sposób, spotka się z zdecydowaną odpowiedzią, bo Stany Zjednoczone i nasi partnerzy i sojusznicy są gotowi na nałożenie potężnych sankcji, między innymi na eksport, których jeszcze nie nałożyliśmy, kiedy Rosja najechała Krym w 2014 i doprowadziła do jej aneksji. Ogromna presja zostanie wywarta na największe instytucje finansowe i kluczowe sektory przemysłu rosyjskiego. Te działania są już de facto gotowe do rozpoczęcia i zostanie to zrobione, jak tylko Rosja wykona zły ruch. Będą długoterminowe konsekwencje i Rosja nie będzie mogła w ogóle konkurować ekonomicznie, ani gospodarczo, ani strategicznie. Jeżeli chodzi o Nord Stream 2, gazociąg, który pompuje gaz z Rosji do Niemiec, jeżeli dojdzie do inwazji na Ukrainę, to się nie wydarzy. Ale nie wyślę żołnierzy amerykańskich, aby walczyli na Ukrainie. Wysłaliśmy na Ukrainę sprzęt wojskowy, aby się mogli bronić. Prowadzimy misję szkoleniową, doradczą, pomoc wywiadowczą w tym samym celu. I proszę mnie dobrze zrozumieć, Stany Zjednoczone będą bronić każdego cala terytorium NATO z pełną siłą amerykańską. Atak na jeden kraj natowski to atak na cały nasz sojusz, na nas wszystkich. Jesteśmy zobowiązani wobec artykułu 5, jest to świętość. Wysłałem dodatkowych żołnierzy, aby zwiększyć wschodnią flankę NATO i jej obronę w odpowiedzi na to, co się dzieje na granicy z Ukrainą. I kolejne kraje zrobiły to samo po to, aby bronić wschodniej flanki NATO. Jednocześnie będziemy kontynuować dalsze ćwiczenia wojskowe z naszymi partnerami i sojusznikami po to, aby zwiększyć nasz poziom gotowości, a jeżeli Rosja przeprowadzi inwazję, będą dalsze kroki, aby zwiększyć naszą obecność w ramach NATO to wesprzeć naszych sojuszników i odstraszyć jakąkolwiek dalszą agresję. Chcę być dobrze zrozumiany. Jeżeli dojdzie do inwazji, będzie to miało również konsekwencje tutaj, u nas w domu. Amerykanie muszą zrozumieć, że obrona demokracji i wolności nigdy nie jest za darmo. To rozumieją zarówno republikanie, jak i demokraci. Chciałbym podziękować wszystkim członkom Kongresu i wszystkim przedstawicieli republikanów i demokratów, którzy chcieli i chcą i bronią naszych podstawowych, wspólnych wartości i zasad. Nie będzie się bez bólu. Może to wpłynąć na nasze ceny energii. Dlatego też podejmujemy już teraz aktywne kroki, aby ta presja nie była tak ogromna na nasz rynek energetyczny. Staramy się rozmawiać z producentami energii i użyjemy wszelkich narzędzi, które tylko mamy, aby uniknąć ewentualnych zwiększenia kosztów energetycznych. Współpracuję z Kongresem, jeżeli chodzi o dodatkowe kroki po to, by chronić konsumentów i jednocześnie odpowiedzieć na taką sytuację, jeżeli dojdzie do zwiększenia kosztów energii. Nie chcemy bezpośredniej konfrontacji z Rosją, ale powiedziałem jasno i często, że jeżeli Rosja za cel weźmie Amerykanów na Ukrainie, to odpowiemy zdecydowanie, silnie. A jeżeli Rosja w wyniku działań asymetrycznych, jak między innymi wobec działań cybernetycznych i działań cybernetycznych na infrastrukturę krytyczną, to też na to odpowiemy. Jesteśmy zjednoczeni z naszymi partnerami w ramach NATO i sojuszników, aby pogłębić naszą współpracę, jeżeli chodzi o działania cybernetyczne i obronę. Oba rozwiązania są nadal otwarte. Rosja i Stany Zjednoczone powinny dążyć do globalnej stabilizacji w imię wspólnej przyszłości, w imię dyplomacji. Ale proszę jeszcze raz jasno zrozumieć, jeżeli dojdzie do inwazji na Ukrainę, odpowiedzialne kraje na całym świecie na pewno odpowiedzą na ten ruch. Wszędzie tam, gdzie wolność jest zagrożona, będziemy jej bronić i zapłacimy tę cenę. Dziękuję bardzo.
Russia's joint Allied Resolve drills have started in Belarus. The drills carried out so close to Ukraine pose a threat of the Russian invasion, clearly do not reduce military tensions. The Baltic states have already demanded from Belarus to explain what threat Russian and Belarusian troops are preparing to combat. Meanwhile, Kyiv has started its military exercises close to Belarusian border. Alexander Papko will give you further details.
Allied Resolve 2022 military drills have started. NATO leadership has described these military exercises as the biggest deployment of Russian troops to Belarus since the Cold War. Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia have activated the risk reduction mechanism provided by the OSCE Vienna document. They requested Minsk to invite observers or give information about the location and type of military activities taking place in the country.
Recently, Russia did not let the Latvian observers in, providing pandemics as an excuse. In Belarus, as far as I know, the situation with the coronavirus is not much better than in Russia. Belarus may use the same pretext to refuse observers to come.
Since the 14th of January, Russia has moved an unprecedented number of troops to Belarus. It has deployed paratroopers, strike aircraft, tanks and tactical missiles. Russian artillerymen, marines and S-400 anti-aircraft systems arrived in Belarus from the Far East, having traveled 10,000 kilometers. Together with the Belarusian military, they are going to repel a simulated attack from NATO countries and Ukraine. According to the OSCE Vienna document on confidence and security building measures, any exercise involving more than 9,500 troops must be reported to neighboring countries 42 days in advance. If more than 13,000 soldiers are involved, the organizers should invite observers. The Russian Defense Ministry claims that the number of troops participating in Allied resolve drills does not exceed the ceiling provided by Vienna document.
I can hardly imagine how such a number of troops can fit into 9,000 people. Russia is moving troops not just from the Eastern Military District. It has deployed in Belarus the 76th Airborne Division from Pskov, as well as at least 2 battalion tactical groups from the 98th Airborne Division from Kostroma and Ivanovo.
According to Kirill Mikhailov, the Kremlin transferred 17 battalion tactical groups to Belarus from the Far East alone, which are on the airfields near Minsk, Lida, Baranovichi and Luninets. However, Russian field camps were also noticed in other places near the border with Ukraine, close to Homel, Yelsk and Vychitsa.
The number of Russian troops in the region, let's call it the Ring of Fire, Trans-Interior, Crimea, Ukraine's border with Belarus and the Rostov region of Russia, according to our conservative estimates, reaches 130,000.
This figure is almost equal to the manpower of all Ukrainian ground forces. While gathering troops close to the east and south of Ukraine, Moscow is demanding NATO countries not to accept Ukraine into the alliance. Russian troops have now approached Ukraine's northern borders.
If some kind of created Nazis in Ukraine do not arrange a provocation, we will not start a war.
The self-proclaimed Belarusian President Lukashenko has made a choice in favor of Russia. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba commented. Parallel to the Russian-Belarusian maneuvers, Ukraine has begun its own military exercises, including those near its northern borders.
We'll use strategic and tactical aviation, unmanned aerial vehicles such as Bayraktar TB2 and modern anti-tank systems that we received last week.
Simultaneously with the exercises in Belarus, Russia is conducting maneuvers in the Vorozhin region and is also planning exercises in the Rostov region bordering Ukraine. In addition, Russia has blocked the sea routes to Ukraine. The Ukraine began naval exercises and declared the Kerch Strait, as well as the significant part of the Black Sea, dangerous for navigation. Moreover, the Russian official sources published a document stating that Belarusian troops may be sent to Syria to support Russian forces there. Lukashenko publicly admitted that he hadn't been informed about such a possibility.
Finlandization of Ukraine. This phrase is being widely discussed by international relations analysts. How was the term Finlandization coined and why it is being discussed? There is no confirmation that this issue was raised by Macron during his meeting with Putin. However, Macron is trying to encourage the dialogue between Kyiv and Moscow. So, the question is, can Ukraine face Finlandization? Yulia Arkhipova knows the answer.
According to the New York Times, French President Emmanuel Macron used the term Finlandization in the conversation with journalists, saying that it was one of the possible scenarios discussed to reduce the tension between Russia and Ukraine. At the meeting with the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, Macron denied that the term Finlandization was used. He also emphasized that he supported NATO's open door policy, as both Ukraine and Finland are the possible future members of the alliance. The Ukrainian President commented on it with a pun.
I've heard of Finlandization for the first time. Have we ever suggested the Ukrainization of any state?
The term described the neutrality of Finland during the Cold War. Finland signed an agreement of friendship, cooperation and mutual assistance with the Soviet Union in April 1948. Under this agreement, Finland retained its independence in internal affairs, but in case of the USSR going to war with any country, Finland was obliged to support the Soviet Union. If Finland had been attacked, it would also have been obliged to seek support from the Soviet Union and not from the Western Bloc.
Ukraine had a neutral status and special relations with a neighboring country. It has never been considered that Ukraine had a non-bloc status until 2014, and Yanukovych in fact approved of these special relations. And what we have seen, internal crisis in Ukraine and the Russia annexed the Crimea, the war in Donbass, despite Ukraine's non-bloc status.
Other experts say that Macron could be advocating for a neutral status of Ukraine, which de facto excludes the country from the list of NATO candidates.
Germany nor France want any conflict in Europe. They understand that conflicts take the resources away and it would weaken Europe. They want a quiet life, with gas quietly running through the Nord Stream, with both German and French business being respected.
Dmitry Peskov, Vladimir Putin's press secretary, admits that the Finlandization of Ukraine is hardly possible, as the intention to join NATO is inscribed in the Ukrainian constitution.
Finlandization, this is good, but there is a constitution and doctrinal documents of Ukraine where it is rather about what constitutes anti-Finlandization of Ukraine in this sense.
The White House welcomes the dialogue between Putin and Macron. However, US officials have not made any comments on the possibility of the Finlandization of Ukraine.
We remain in close touch with our counterparts, but I don't have an update on any specifics of behind-the-scenes diplomatic talks.
Is it possible to make Ukraine neutral after almost 8 years of war? Political experts have been debating on this question. However, one thing is certain. Ukraine comes through a disillusionment process of the limits of support from its Western allies.
5 years in prison for playing Minecraft. In Russia, a 16-year-old boy was given such a sentence as he was convicted of terrorism. 2 years ago, he printed leaflets in support of the political prisoners and then created a federal security service building in the online game, which he wanted to destroy afterwards. But the Russian judicial system is not always that tough, especially in the cases which involve powerful officials. Alexandra Shapalina will give you an account of 2 different stories that will explain how Russian justice works.
In a small Russian town called Kansk, a military court sentenced a 16-year-old teenager to 5 years in prison, and 2 of his friends were given a 3-year suspended sentence. When they were 14 years old, they distributed leaflets in their hometown in defense of the political prisoners. In addition, they played Minecraft, where they built a virtual building of the FSB, which they wanted to blow up, inside a computer game. Is this a crime that needs to be punished by 5 years of imprisonment? The Russian court believes so. Nikita Uvarov, who got the prison sentence in his last speech in court, said that he would serve the sentence with a clear conscience and dignity.
The law must be severe to those who deliberately committed a serious crime, caused damage to people's lives, the interests of society and the state. And of course, the law must be humane to those who stumbled.
The case of the Kansk teenagers was heard behind closed doors, and they were judged by a military tribunal. The society will not be presented with any evidence of guilt. A child who spent almost a year in a pre-trial detention center, having got there at the age of 14, will now be sent to prison.
I cried and I shouted in the court that it is a disgrace, a disgrace.
During one of his hearings, Nikita said,
"It will not be able to tell the court about the very terrorism that the investigators accused me of, since it was not in my head and in my thoughts. I am a child who wanted to appear more mature in the eyes of my friends. I am a kid who wanted to make friends. I am not a terrorist."
However, Russian judicial system isn't always so tough. We followed how high-ranking security officials and the State Duma deputy from one of the Russian regions, Chechnya, published videos with death threats against members of the family of Chechen federal judge Said Yangulbayev. Before that, Ramzan Kadyrov, the governor of Chechnya, swore blood revenge on the whole family of the judge, just because they dared to publicly criticize Chechen authorities.
No matter how they hide, we'll find and destroy them.
There was no reaction from the federal authorities. Although the statements of high-ranking officials might be seen as the violation of the Russian criminal code,
there are direct articles of the criminal code that those persons have violated. For example, the Article 119, the threat of murder using official authority.
Nevertheless, no criminal cases were initiated. There were no dismissals. There was not even a public condemnation from Russian federal law enforcement officers. Instead, the head of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, records a video right after the meeting with Vladimir Putin, where he says that he is glad to serve Russia.
Our dear President Vladimir Vladimirovich has supported us as usual.
The story became viral when Chechen policemen forcibly detained Zarya Musayeva, the 59-year-old wife of the federal judge Said Yangulbayev, in Nizhny Novgorod, and took her 2,000 kilometers away to Chechnya. The Russian court also considered that she posed a threat to public safety and should be put in a detention center. The court refused to put Zarya under house arrest for a crime that she had probably not committed at all. She is accused of injuring a law enforcement officer. According to investigators, she scratched the policeman's face.
The video clearly shows that she is ill. She has half-closed eyes, she waves her head, and how she attacked the police in this form is completely incomprehensible. It defies any logic.
When the woman was detained, she could barely stand on her feet. She was forced to walk barefoot in cold winter weather, and she was taken out of the house by force, not being allowed to take any insulin with her. Since then, Zarema has been in fact a prisoner of the Chechen security forces.
Zarema said that while she was being transported for a day, she was not given insulin, she was not fed, she was not given water.
And how did Kremlin react to all of this?
Well, this is a fantastic story. We prefer not to believe such reports without any confirmation.
Since it became clear that the story is real, the Kremlin has not been able to give any judgment on that. The reaction of the Russian authorities ends with setting up a preventive talk of Valentina Tereshkova, who heads the Duma Ethics Committee, with State Duma Deputy Adam Dalimkhanov. She should explain what the legal ways to fight political opponents are. The Chechen security forces, who recorded messages similar to Dalimkhanov's, will not be responsible for their actions.
I am Russia. Russia is me.
That's all for today. The Eastern Europe review will be back next Sunday. I am Sergei Pelessan. Thank you for being with us, and please keep watching TVP World.
TVP World is back. This is World News. We have the latest. Alliance is as strong as it has ever been, said President of the United States Joe Biden while addressing his nations and the rest of the world with regards to the current threat around Ukraine. He spoke about the measures that his country has already taken and those which it is prepared to take if the situation escalates. Take a listen.
Joe Biden provided an update about the situation in Ukraine.
Good afternoon.
On the same day on which some Ukrainian banks and government websites fell victims of cyber attacks. The US president summarized the diplomatic efforts of the last weeks.
The United States is prepared no matter what happens. We are ready with diplomacy to be engaged in diplomacy with Russia and our allies and partners to improve stability and security in Europe as a whole. And we are ready to respond decisively to Russian attack on Ukraine.
Regarding the Kremlin's announcement that the Russian soldiers are being withdrawn from the vicinity of the Ukrainian border, he said it is too soon to call it true.
As long as there is hope of diplomatic resolution that prevents the use of force and avoids incredible human suffering that would follow, we will pursue it. The Russian defense minister reported today that some military units are leaving their positions near Ukraine. That would be good, but we have not yet verified that. We have not yet verified the Russian military units are returning to their home bases. Indeed, our analysts indicate that they remain very much in a threatening position. And the fact remains, right now, Russia has more than 150,000 troops encircling Ukraine and Belarus and along Ukraine's border. An invasion remains distinctly possible. That's why I've asked several times that all Americans in Ukraine leave now before it's too late to leave safely.
Biden reminded about the gravity of the situation and stated that the US embassy is temporarily being moved from Kyiv to Lviv, a city in the west of the country, farther away from the border with Russia.
It is why we have temporarily relocated our embassy from Kyiv to Lviv in western Ukraine, approaching the Polish border. And we've been transparent with the American people and with the world about Russia's plans and the seriousness of the situation so that everyone can see for themselves what is happening. We've shared what we know and what we're doing about it.
The US president also addressed the Russian society.
Let me be equally clear about what we are not doing. The United States and NATO are not a threat to Russia. Ukraine is not threatening Russia. Neither the U.S. nor NATO have missiles in Ukraine. We do not have plans to put them there as well. We're not targeting the people of Russia. We do not seek to destabilize Russia. To the citizens of Russia, you are not our enemy. And I do not believe you want a bloody, destructive war against Ukraine, a country and a people with whom you share such deep ties of family, history, and culture.
President Biden said that the US and its allies are ready to impose sanctions on Russia if an invasion of Ukraine took place.
I say these things not to provoke, but to speak the truth, because the truth matters. Accountability matters. If Russia does invade in the days and weeks ahead, the human cost for Ukraine will be immense. And the strategic cost for Russia will also be immense. If Russia attacks Ukraine, it'll be met with overwhelming international condemnation. The world will not forget that Russia chose needless death and destruction. Invading Ukraine will prove to be a self-inflicted wound. The United States and our allies and partners will respond decisively. The West is united and galvanized. Today, our NATO allies and the alliance is as unified and determined as it has ever been.
The US president said that the pipeline Nord Stream 2 would not be finalized if Russia invaded Ukraine.
If Russia proceeds, we will rally the world to oppose its aggression. The United States and our allies and partners around the world are ready to impose powerful sanctions on export controls, including actions that we did not pursue when Russia invaded Crimea in eastern Ukraine in 2014. We will put intense pressure on their largest and most significant financial institutions and key industries. These measures are ready to go as soon and if Russia moves. We'll impose long-term consequences that will undermine Russia's ability to compete economically and strategically. And when it comes to Nord Stream 2, the pipeline that would bring natural gas from Russia to Germany, if Russia further invades Ukraine, it will not happen. While I will not send American servicemen to fight in Ukraine, we have supplied the Ukrainian military with equipment to help them defend themselves. We provided training and advice and intelligence for the same purpose. And make no mistake, the United States will defend every inch of NATO territory with the full force of American power. An attack against one NATO country is an attack against all of us. And the United States' commitment to Article 5 is sacrosanct.
President Biden also mentioned the fact that a war in Eastern Europe could also affect the citizens of the US economically.
And to stay updated, visit our website, tvpworld.com.
Hello everyone and welcome to Shape of Art, the show that brings you the most interesting stories from the world of culture. My name is Karolina Ciesielska and I will be your host today. Let's take a look at today's headlines together. The Gallery, 3 short stories from the world of culture. The history and the future of Villa Aurora in Rome. The Gazdowska and Kumoterki parades in the Polish mountains. Uninterrupted performance of the John Cage composition. Tribute to Monica Vitti. In the gallery, we will talk about the winners of this year's Brit Awards. Then we will show you the annual Orchid Festival in Kew Gardens in London. And finally, we will explore the Stockholm exhibition that highlights pandemic-era art.
Adele!
With Brit Awards 2022 taking place recently, there will be no surprise to anyone that Adele just blown away the competition. Adele, a renowned British singer and songwriter who returned with new material after 6 years, won 3 statuettes. In total, the artist won 12 statuettes, becoming the most awarded woman in the history of Brit Awards. In this light, her new title, the Queen of Brits, is self-explanatory.
I love being an artist, I really do, and I genuinely can't believe that it's my job. And real artistry, I know I've spoken about it before, but there's so many new artists here. England, the UK, we have so many incredible new young artists coming up, and never lose sight of why you are who you are. The reason people are into you is because of something you have in you. Don't ever let go of that, ever.
The Brit Awards, the most important British music awards, were presented for the 42nd time at London's O2 Stadium. The gala began with a performance by Ed Sheeran. However, there was a slight twist to it, as it has become a tradition at the Brit Awards that songs are performed in slightly altered musical arrangement to make the ceremony even more special. This year's awards have reminded the British that when it comes to music, there is only one queen. Congratulations to Adele and all the nominees. Can the culture of one country be transmitted by something as unusual as flora? Artists from Kew Gardens Orchid Festival in London proved that it is quite possible.
Through the glass house we try to bring in as much colour to just transport people into that sort of feel-good world, or of Costa Rica, of the Caribbean, or just sort of to make it really pretty and smashing.
This is the 26th annual Orchid Festival to be held in Kew. The centerpiece of the installation is a floral artwork representing Costa Rican sunrise. This particular Central American country is the inspiration for this year's festival. It is home to around nearly 2,000 types of orchids.
Costa Rica is really important for all plant species. It has a very high number of, 6% of the world's plant species are found in Costa Rica, and it's a tiny country. You know, it's I think it's 0.3% the size of the terrestrial covering of the planet.
Notably, there are around 28,000 species of orchids in the world. The festival has an environmental message as well. Scientists from Kew Gardens work with groups in Costa Rica to protect its precious wildlife. In this particular situation, art and science join forces to preserve precious flora of Costa Rica, and they prove that such alliance is possible. The pandemic as an experience affected in a distinct way not only the cultural centres but also the artists themselves. The feeling of loneliness and subordination to restrictions triggered a new artistic movement. For that reason, the museum in Stockholm decided to bring together works by selected artists who shared visually their experience with COVID.
This is an art that deals with the inner world from the private home, and it's a reaction about the pandemic. It's a consequence of the pandemic. You work at the home, you work in the studio, you're not outside.
The exhibition portrays situations that many have experienced during this difficult period. Paintings of Zoom meetings, a lonely dinner table installation, or sculptures made with neons of shops forced to shut down due to the pandemic. Although the topic might seem hard to swallow, the exhibition itself is to give hope for the future. It is to show that this period might end and something new is awaiting.
The famous Villa Aurora in Rome, containing Caravaggio's only known fresco, remains unoccupied, as it did not receive any bids during an auction which took place on January 18th. Another auction is scheduled for April. Let's see what is so special about this impressive building.
The Villa Aurora in Rome received the highest estimated price in history, namely €471 million, but it failed to attract the right customers. The auction came after the 2018 death of Prince Niccolò Boncompagni Ludovisi and a long inheritance dispute between the children of the prince and his wife of 19 years, American-born Princess Rita Boncompagni Ludovisi.
I've lived here for 19 years with my beloved husband, and it's been a journey of love, a great responsibility. So it's really not only the history of this family, but it's the history of Italy.
The house boasts 11 bedrooms and 10 bathrooms, but most importantly, a living museum. After Cardinal Ludovico Ludovisi bought the villa in 1621, the real estate became a true artistic hub with numerous invaluable pieces. One of the most famous includes the only known fresco by Caravaggio, who at 20 years old adorned the keystone with a portrayal of Jupiter, Neptune and Pluto, where he used his own body and face as a template. The artwork was covered with whitewash, most probably for indecency, and was rediscovered in 1968. Aside from Caravaggio, other pieces include Pan's statue attributed to Michelangelo, bust of Caesar Augustus from the 2nd AD, and a number of frescoes by Giovanni Francesco Barbieri known as Il Guercino. It was thanks to his work depicting Aurora the villa got its name. Since the villa is protected by the state, art lovers demanded the government to take part in the auction. However, the state could not muster up the finances required to purchase the villa. Many fear once in the hands of a private owner, the artworks would be in danger and inaccessible to visitors.
No, non è tenuto.
No, she would not be obliged to. Being a private ownership, she will have all the rights of private property as such. If it were bought by Italian government, obviously it would be quite different. The access should be guaranteed.
A new auction is planned for April 2022, with the minimum bid reduced from €356 million to about €285 million.
The Gazdowska and Kumoterki parades in Podhale in southern Poland are already a tradition. Parade rides horse-drawn carriages is one of the attractions that awaits the public as part of the festival. Here's more.
For shepherds, winter is a time of relaxation, yet they still spend their time very actively. The shepherds made their way down to Białoruś for the Gazdowska and Kumoterki parades in large numbers. This is the Gazdów parade. Those who crave tradition came to take part in the event.
Kumoterki gave an opportunity to move, so that the horse would not become lazy, because in winter there is always a little less movement.
Kumoterki is a race in a small sleigh, and inside of the sleigh, kumoter and kumoshka.
Great-grandparents and grandparents used to take a child to its baptism during the time of carnival. They rode such kumoter sledges with kumoshka, and since the snow was terrific, they did not hold back.
In addition, skiing competitions, when the skier is pulled by a horse and a rider. It is a tradition for which the Highlanders keep their fingers crossed for snow. And as it goes for the snow, it's great. 10 out of 10.
The performance of a piece by the American composer John Cage is scheduled to run for 639 years. Not even a pandemic managed to interrupt the concert. On Saturday, the German audience heard the first sound change since 2013. Let's find out more.
After 15 months, a note in the world's slowest piece of music has changed. An organ work as slow as possible by American composer and avant-garde artist John Cage is performed for more than 20 years in the Burchardi Church in Halberstadt in Germany.
You can experience this in the whole church. There are places where it sounds like in Hamburg Harbor, so a la woo. And then you go 2 steps further and you're in the engine room. It suddenly goes wow, 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 wow.
This time the sound change was performed by the Bremen musicologist Ute Schalz-Rolenze.
That was a 7-note sound. Now it's a 6-note sound, and 7 tones are different sound than 6 tones. Haven't you heard it?
Interestingly, the coronavirus pandemic did not disturb the performance of the piece, and each change of the chord attracts a large group of fans of John Cage's music.
To be very, very honest, I didn't notice it change first, because it's very subtle.
I found it interesting when you developed a tension and you were always like, now it's coming, now it's coming. Was that the sound change? It is an exciting thing because it tells time like nothing else.
John Milton Cage, an American composer and music theorist, was a pioneer of electroacoustic music and non-standard use of musical instruments. He was one of the leading artists of the post-war avant-garde and had a powerful influence not only on composers of contemporary or electronic music, but also artists of conceptual art, modern dance, or alternative of any kind. Many believe that he had the greatest influence on redefining the musical aesthetics of the 28th century. He used to describe music as an affirmation of life. The organ notes are maintained day and night by an electrically operated bellows. This unusual concert of the musical piece began in 2001 with and long pauses. It was not until a year and a half later that the first pipe tones were heard. The musical act is planned for a length of 639 years.
Cage
would have said that is not supposed to do anything. We should listen with open ears and an empty mind and just listen to the sound. If you want to charge it with meaning, that is a project against the fast passing of time.
The last harmonic shift will occur in the 27th century, but the question remains, will anybody hear it then?
Queen of Italian cinema, internationally award-winning actress, the muse of director Michelangelo Antonioni, Monica Vitti, has died at the age of 90. In the English-speaking world, she was the best known for her starring role in The Modesty Blaze. Let us recall this exceptional actress.
Maybe I disappoint you, but I'm not a diva with a car lined with fur, nor lined with anything because I don't have the car.
She was called as the Queen of Italian cinema. Director Michelangelo Antonioni considered her his muse and cinematic alter ego. Audience and critics loved her for her sensuality and cerebral approach to acting. Monica Vitti, one of the greatest actresses of all time, died at the age of 90 on the 2nd of February. A few days later, a moving farewell ceremony was held in the Church of the Artist in Rome, in the presence of friends, city authorities and hundreds of her fans.
Michelangelo Antonioni was looking for a voice of a gas station attendant for the film Il Grido, a breathy voice accustomed to the open air. He chose Monica. One day, during the dubbing, Michelangelo told her, "You have a beautiful neck. You could become an actress." Maybe he was right. In fact, in 2009, the billboard for the Cannes Film Festival was a photo of Monica with her back turned.
Born Maria Luisa Ciccarelli in Rome on the 3rd of November 1931, Monica Vitti became an Italian and world screen icon. A classically trained actress, worked with the greatest visionaries of cinema like Louis Buñuel or Ettore Scola. But what brought her international fame and respect from critics and the public are the roles in the Michelangelo Antonioni's 1960s existential angst cycle, including L'Avventura and La Notte. At the end of the 70s, she withdrew from movies and devoted herself to the stage. Whether she played in the theater, in the cinema, or gave interviews, her perception of life remained unchanged.
The beginning of everything is beautiful. I begin my life today and I want it to be like the sea, like the mountains, like a flower, like a dog, like a friend. That's enough now. I understand that it is natural we all die, but I think we should invent a different way to pass away. Sweeter, more serene, less painful for those who go and those who stay.
At the end of her career, she became an acting teacher. She had been absent from public life since 2001 due to the Alzheimer's. After her death, one of the film critics said, "Monica Vitti was and always will be one of the great reasons to fall in love with movies."
Love. Love is an absolute necessity, truly a necessity.
Ma tutte le volte che ho cercato di comunicare con qualcuno, l'amore è andato via.
And that is all for today. Thank you for being with us and for watching Shape of Art. Stay tuned for more latest news and comments on art and culture.
Pierwsza informacja odnośnie do kryzysu wokół Rosji i Ukrainy. Od samego początku tego kryzysu mówiłem jasno i cały czas powtarzałem, że Stany Zjednoczone są gotowe, niezależnie na to, co się wydarzy. Jesteśmy gotowi, jeżeli chodzi o obranie ścieżki dyplomatycznej, aby zaangażować się właśnie w takie rozwiązanie wraz z naszymi sojusznikami i partnerami, aby zagwarantować bezpieczeństwo i stabilizację w Europie, ale jednocześnie jesteśmy gotowi na odpowiedź zdecydowaną, że dojdzie do ataku Rosji na Ukrainę, który nadal jest bardzo możliwy. Uwzględniając ostatnie wydarzenia z ostatnich tygodni i miesięcy, to było nasze podejście cały czas i pozostaje tym podejściem również obecnie. Także dzisiaj chciałbym Amerykanom powiedzieć, jak wygląda sytuacja na miejscu odnośnie do kroków, które podjęliśmy, od działań, do których jesteśmy gotowi podjąć i co tak na dobrą sprawę, o co toczy się gra dla nas, dla całego świata i jak może to wpłynąć na nas tutaj w Stanach. Przez ostatnie tygodnie wraz z partnerami i sojusznikami moja administracja była zaangażowana w szereg rozmów, w zasadzie dyplomacji, która trwa 24 godziny na dobę. W tym tygodniu rozmawiałem z prezydentem Putinem, aby jasno mu powiedzieć, że jesteśmy gotowi, aby utrzymać dyplomację na wysokim poziomie, a to wszystko po to, aby dojść do porozumienia z Rosją wraz z partnerami i sojusznikami, aby odpowiedzieć na zagadnienia dotyczące bezpieczeństwa, jeżeli tego chce. Ponieważ są takie zagadnienia bezpieczeństwa również po naszej stronie. Prezydent Putin i ja zgodziliśmy się, że nasze zespoły powinny kontynuować dalsze rozmowy wraz z naszymi partnerami, sojusznikami z Europy. Zaledwie wczoraj rząd rosyjski publicznie zaproponował kontynuację dyplomacji. Ja się z tym zgadzam. Dyplomacja powinna mieć szansę, aby odnieść rzeczywiście sukces i uważam, że naprawdę są sposoby na to, aby odpowiedzieć na te zagadnienia bezpieczeństwa. Stany Zjednoczone przedstawiły konkretne pomysły i rozwiązania po to, aby stworzyć właściwe środowisko bezpieczeństwa w Europie i jednocześnie zaproponowaliśmy nowe środki kontroli zbrojeń, nowe środki przejrzystości działania, nowe środki stabilizacji działań i wszystkie te środki dotyczą wszystkich stron, zarówno NATO, jak i Rosji. Dlatego też chcemy podjąć właściwe działania zorientowane na jeden wspólny cel po to, aby zwiększyć poziom naszego bezpieczeństwa. Na pewno nie poświęcimy naszych podstawowych wartości. Kraje i narody mają prawo do integralności terytorialnej i do suwerenności, ale również do wolności. Do wolności również do tego, aby wybrać własną ścieżkę rozwoju, a także wybrać sojusze, do których chcą należeć. Ale to i tak oznacza, że dyplomacja ma tutaj bardzo dużo możliwości i pola działania i to może doprowadzić do deeskalacji, co jest najlepszym rozwiązaniem według nas dla wszystkich. Dlatego też będziemy kontynuować nasze wysiłki dyplomatyczne w bliskiej konsultacji z partnerami i sojusznikami. Tak długo, jak jest nadzieja na to, że będzie osiągnięte rozwiązanie dyplomatyczne, dzięki czemu unikniemy użycia siły i jednocześnie nie doprowadzi do śmierci wielu osób, będziemy tak też robić. Dzisiaj Ministerstwo Obrony rosyjskie powiedziało, że część wojska wycofuje się z terytorium przy Ukrainie. Byłoby dobrze, gdyby tak było, ale jeszcze nie mogliśmy tego potwierdzić. Nie mogliśmy też potwierdzić, jakoby te oddziały rzeczywiście wycofywały się do swoich baz. A według naszych analiz natomiast dalej są na stanowisku dość niebezpiecznym dla Ukrainy. Obecnie ponad 150 000 żołnierzy otoczyło Białoruś i teoretycznie też Ukrainę i jest głównie wzdłuż granicy z Ukrainą. Dlatego inwazja jest bardzo prawdopodobna. Dlatego też poprosiłem wielokrotnie, aby wszyscy Amerykanie, którzy są obecnie na Ukrainie, opuścili ten kraj teraz, zanim będzie za późno, aby w sposób bezpieczny ten kraj opuścić. Stąd też tymczasowo przenieśliśmy naszą ambasadę z Kijowa do Lwowa na zachodniej części Ukrainy, blisko granicy z Polską. I mówiliśmy jasno Amerykanom i też całemu światu odnośnie do planów Rosji. I powaga tej sytuacji jest znacząca, aby każdy wiedział i widział, co się dzieje. Podzieliliśmy się tą wiedzą, którą mamy i tym, co robimy w tej sprawie. I chciałbym jasno również powiedzieć, czego nie robimy. Stany Zjednoczone i NATO nie są zagrożeniem dla Rosji. Ukraina nie jest zagrożeniem dla Rosji. Ani Stany, ani NATO nie mają pocisków rakietowych na Ukrainie i nie mamy planów, aby je tam mieć. Naszym celem nie jest naród rosyjski. Nie chcemy doprowadzić do destabilizacji Rosji. Zwracając się do obywateli Rosji, nie jesteście naszym wrogiem. I nie wierzę, że nie chcecie krwawej, destrukcyjnej wojny przeciwko Ukrainie z ludźmi, z którymi wiąże was bardzo dużo, jeżeli chodzi o więzy rodziny, kulturę i historię. 77 lat temu nasi obywatele walczyli ramię w ramię, aby zakończyć najgorszą wojnę w historii. Druga wojna światowa była wojną z walki na pewną konieczność, ale jeżeli Rosja zaatakuje Ukrainę, to będzie wojna z wyboru, wojna bez powodu. I mówię to nie po to, aby sprowokować, ale powiedzieć prawdę, ponieważ prawda jest istotna, przewidywalność jest istotna. Jeżeli Rosja doprowadzi do inwazji w ciągu następnych dni bądź tygodni, koszty ludzkie po stronie Ukrainy będą ogromne, a koszty strategiczne dla Rosji będą tym większe. Jeżeli Rosja zaatakuje Ukrainę, spotka się z ogromnym potępieniem międzynarodowym i świat nie zapomni, że Rosja wybrała drogę niepotrzebnej śmierci i destrukcji. Inwazja Ukrainy będzie ogromną raną. Stany Zjednoczone i nasi sojusznicy i partnerzy odpowiedzą w sposób zdecydowany. Zachód jest zjednoczony i działa wspólnie. Nasi sojusznicy z NATO i sojusz jako taki jest tak zdeterminowany i tak zjednoczony, jak jeszcze nigdy nie był. Źródłem naszej siły jest przede wszystkim nasze uniwersalne podejście i nasze wspólne wartości demokratyczne, które nas łączą, ponieważ tu chodzi o coś więcej, nie tylko o Rosję i Ukrainę. Tu chodzi przede wszystkim o reprezentowanie tego, w co wierzymy. Tu chodzi o przyszłość dla naszego świata. Tu chodzi o wolność. Tu chodzi też o prawo do tego, aby kraje miały prawo wyboru własnego losu, ale jednocześnie, aby ludzie mogli decydować o swojej przyszłości. I dany kraj nie może zmieniać granic sąsiada siłą. I to jest nasza wizja. Jestem przekonany, że ta wizja, ta wolność będzie tym, co zwycięży, jeżeli Rosja odpowie w inny sposób, spotka się z zdecydowaną odpowiedzią, bo Stany Zjednoczone i nasi partnerzy i sojusznicy są gotowi na nałożenie potężnych sankcji, między innymi na eksport, których jeszcze nie nałożyliśmy, kiedy Rosja najechała Krym w 2014 i doprowadziła do jej aneksji. Ogromna presja zostanie wywarta na największe instytucje finansowe i kluczowe sektory przemysłu rosyjskiego. Te działania są już de facto gotowe do rozpoczęcia i zostanie to zrobione, jak tylko Rosja wykona zły ruch. Będą długoterminowe konsekwencje i Rosja nie będzie mogła w ogóle konkurować ekonomicznie, ani gospodarczo, ani strategicznie. Jeżeli chodzi o Nord Stream 2, gazociąg, który pompuje gaz z Rosji do Niemiec, jeżeli dojdzie do inwazji na Ukrainę, to się nie wydarzy. Ale nie wyślę żołnierzy amerykańskich, aby walczyli na Ukrainie. Wysłaliśmy na Ukrainę sprzęt wojskowy, aby się mogli bronić. Prowadzimy misję szkoleniową, doradczą, pomoc wywiadowczą w tym samym celu. I proszę mnie dobrze zrozumieć, Stany Zjednoczone będą bronić każdego cala terytorium NATO z pełną siłą amerykańską. Atak na jeden kraj natowski to atak na cały nasz sojusz, na nas wszystkich. Jesteśmy zobowiązani wobec artykułu 5, jest to świętość. Wysłałem dodatkowych żołnierzy, aby zwiększyć wschodnią flankę NATO i jej obronę w odpowiedzi na to, co się dzieje na granicy z Ukrainą. I kolejne kraje zrobiły to samo po to, aby bronić wschodniej flanki NATO. Jednocześnie będziemy kontynuować dalsze ćwiczenia wojskowe z naszymi partnerami i sojusznikami po to, aby zwiększyć nasz poziom gotowości, a jeżeli Rosja przeprowadzi inwazję, będą dalsze kroki, aby zwiększyć naszą obecność w ramach NATO, wesprzeć naszych sojuszników i odstraszyć jakąkolwiek dalszą agresję. Chcę być dobrze zrozumiany. Jeżeli dojdzie do inwazji, będzie to miało również konsekwencje tutaj, u nas w domu. Amerykanie muszą zrozumieć, że obrona demokracji i wolności nigdy nie jest za darmo. To rozumieją zarówno republikanie, jak i demokraci. Chciałbym podziękować wszystkim członkom Kongresu i wszystkim przedstawicieli republikanów i demokratów, którzy chcieli i chcą i bronią naszych podstawowych, wspólnych wartości i zasad. Nie będzie się bez bólu. Może to wpłynąć na nasze ceny energii. Dlatego też podejmujemy już teraz aktywne kroki, aby ta presja nie była tak ogromna na nasz rynek energetyczny Staramy się rozmawiać z producentami energii i użyjemy wszelkich narzędzi, które tylko mamy, aby uniknąć ewentualnych zwiększenia kosztów energetycznych. Współpracuję z Kongresem, jeżeli chodzi o dodatkowe kroki po to, by chronić konsumentów i jednocześnie odpowiedzieć na taką sytuację, jeżeli chodzi do zwiększenia kosztów energii. Nie chcemy bezpośredniej konfrontacji z Rosją, ale powiedziałem jasno i często, że jeżeli Rosja za cel weźmie Amerykanów na Ukrainie, to odpowiemy zdecydowanie, silnie. A jeżeli Rosja w wyniku działań asymetrycznych, jak między innymi wobec działań cybernetycznych i działań cybernetycznych na infrastrukturę krytyczną, to też na to odpowiemy. Jesteśmy zjednoczeni z naszymi partnerami w ramach NATO i sojuszników, aby pogłębić naszą współpracę, jeżeli chodzi o działania cybernetyczne i obronę. Oba rozwiązania są nadal otwarte. Rosja i Stany Zjednoczone powinny dążyć do globalnej stabilizacji w imię wspólnej przyszłości, w imię dyplomacji. Ale proszę jeszcze raz jasno zrozumieć, jeżeli dojdzie do inwazji na Ukrainę, odpowiedzialne kraje na całym świecie na pewno odpowiedzą na ten ruch. Wszędzie tam, gdzie wolność jest zagrożona, będziemy jej bronić i zapłacimy tę cenę. Dziękuję bardzo.
Soon, I want to notice that we exercise the various possible enemy actions on the surface and in the undersea environment in all directions.
In an attempt to ease tensions, the Russian foreign minister further assured that all of the exercises taking place with the participation of the Russian army were in accordance with the plan, and that troops would withdraw from the exercises' locations following their conclusion.
The drills start, are concluded and finish as per plan. We have spoken about it many times. The drills are conducted according to the schedule agreed upon long before.
Despite Moscow's denial that it ever planned to attack Ukraine, it has requested legally enforceable guarantees from the US and NATO that Kyiv would not be permitted to join the military alliance. However, Washington and Brussels have declined to make such commitments.
And we will discuss all of the recent developments in Ukraine and whether a political solution can be found when we are joined by Professor Przemysław Żurawski-Welgrajewski from the University of Łódź. Moving on, yesterday there was some confusion concerning President Volodymyr Zelensky's comments that war would break out on Wednesday, which he claimed was just a joke. Instead, the comedian by profession called on the people of Ukraine to hold a national day of unity, to fly flags and sing the national anthem. Also on Monday, he met with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, as well as reaffirmed his country's NATO ambitions.
Doesn't help us.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called on his country's people to declare February 16th a day of unity and urged them to fly flags and sing the national anthem. While Ukrainian officials stress that Zelensky was not predicting an attack on Wednesday, there have been media reports that Russia could invade on this day. Mikhailo Podolyak, an advisor to Zelensky's chief of staff, reported that the president was responding in part with irony to media reports of the potential date of the invasion. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz met Zelensky on Monday in Kyiv to show solidarity, underlining that he expects clear steps from Russia to de-escalate the conflict with Ukraine.
I am making it clear once again here in Kyiv that Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity are non-negotiable for Germany. We therefore expect Russia to take clear steps to de-escalate the current tensions.
Scholz added that further military aggression against Ukraine would have serious political, economic and geostrategic consequences for Russia.
We have here, first of all, to deal with a profound discussion within the Germany's ruling party, the Social Democrats, which Olaf Scholz is also representing. They are now discussing not only their foreign policy paths and stance with regard to Russia and with regard to Russian-Ukrainian conflict, but they also discussed their stance on armament exports as well. And what is more profound and more groundbreaking for the German Social Democrats now is also a discussion on the role Mr. Gerhard Schröder.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian president once again confirmed that Ukraine will continue to pursue NATO membership despite Russia's opposition and some Western countries' skepticism.
Ukraine's desire to join the European Union to strengthen its borders for future alliance and our ambitions, you are very well aware of it. It is the country's wish. Also, there is a war in the east, we understand, and we would like NATO membership, which would be a guarantee of our security, our territorial integrity. It is enshrined in the Ukrainian legislation and Ukrainian constitution.
One of Russia's main security demands is to block the expansion of NATO along its eastern flank, a demand the West has not accepted.
Speaking of Ukraine's NATO aspirations, given the recent pressure from Russia and given the comments of the Ukrainian ambassador to Britain, there has been some questions as to whether Ukraine will voluntarily abandon its aspirations to join NATO. That being said, however, both the Ukrainian government and its residents are adamant that Ukraine still has its own voice and right to self-determination.
The broader issue of security guarantees is key for our country. There is no doubt that the best guarantee would be an immediate admission of Ukraine to the NATO alliance. But threats to Ukraine exist right here, right now. The idea that we could potentially give up the goal of joining NATO just because Russia invades us is simply nonsense. If Ukraine says it must be in NATO, then Ukraine should be in NATO. But peace in Ukraine does not depend on whether Ukraine is in NATO or not. Ambassador Vadim Pristaiko said that Ukraine should be more flexible, and the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry has confirmed Ukrainian policy has not changed. It remains what it was. I myself am fully for joining NATO.
There is no doubt that we need to be sure that our pro-European state, our European partners, can guarantee our security. Personally, I am also for partnership with Russia in order to resolve issues. One needs to review the situation and make different decisions, adjusting our foreign policy, not just give a flat refusal.
According to the most recent KIIS poll from December, the majority of Ukrainians, 59%, want their country to be a NATO member, and only 20% are opposed. And we're not done yet. Still ahead on World News tonight. Polish copper giant KGHM signs a deal for small module reactors. The Russian figure skater at the center of a doping scandal, to the shock of many, is still allowed to compete. As the world is anxiously awaiting the upcoming developments in Ukraine, some countries are already preparing mechanisms for dealing with the humanitarian consequences of a potential invasion. A military conflict could send millions of refugees to Poland alone.
The intentions of the Russian government concerning Ukraine remain unclear. If an invasion were to happen, however, one of the inseparable consequences of the conflict would be a wave of refugees fleeing from the war zone.
In that worst-case scenario, the most tragic scenario, if the attack comes from three sides and if the fighting is quite bloody, we expect a wave of around 3 to 5 million refugees coming to Poland.
That is one of the reasons why the Polish president convened a cabinet council where top Polish officials discussed the situation in Ukraine and its potential consequences for Poland.
Among the scenarios we discussed was the problem if a military conflict happened, all the situations that could follow. Primarily the problem of refugees who could arrive in our territory seeking shelter here, seeking help, seeking here a safe haven. The thing is to ensure conditions are safe for them, but also safe for our society, because that is the most important to us.
The Polish government has taken measures to prepare for the possible influx of refugees.
The Minister of the Interior and Administration, through the voivodes, directed questions to the local governments concerning the potential accommodation for those fleeing Ukraine towards the European Union. So, The preparations in this matter at this moment are conducted.
There are already between 1 and 2 million Ukrainians living in Poland. The country also became a new home for thousands of Belarusians who fled the violent crackdown on the opposition in Belarus after the 2020 elections.
As we anticipate further Russian aggression towards Ukraine, we can't lose sight of the fact that war between Russia and Ukraine has been ongoing in the eastern part of the country since 2014. And that war has claimed the lives of about 14,000 people. Our reporter Tomasz Grzywaczewski is in Kyiv and shows us an eye-opening reminder of the lives lost due to Russian aggression.
Right next to me, there is a memory wall of fallen defenders of Ukraine in the Russian-Ukrainian war in Donbas. Here you can see the faces of Ukrainian soldiers killed since the year 2014 during Russian aggression against Ukraine. Russian ambassador to the EU, Vladimir Chizhov, warned that Russia can launch counter-operation against Ukraine in case of any Russian civilians are killed in Donbas or elsewhere in eastern Ukraine. It raised the fears of false flag Russian operation, a provocation aiming at justifying another Russian attack in Donbas. And it will mean that on this wall there will be much more pictures of Ukrainian soldiers killed by Russian aggression. For TVP World, Tomasz Grzywaczewski.
Polish copper giant KGHM has signed a deal to build small module reactors. The technology and know-how will be delivered by its U.S. partners. A similar project has also been announced by the fuel company Orlen. Additionally, Poland's Deputy Prime Minister Jacek Sasin met with the U.S. Secretary of Energy regarding plans to construct a large nuclear power plant.
Poland's company KGHM is the world's largest producer of silver and one of the largest producers of copper. Such a large company especially needs access to energy at a stable price. Therefore, the company wants to build its own small nuclear power plants.
All this will bring opportunities not only for us as an energy-intensive company, but also for other industrial companies and maybe later for Polish citizens as well.
As part of the agreement signed with the Americans, 6 small power plants will be built in Poland. The first one could start operating in 7 years. This technology will be used by large companies, but its implementation also opens the possibility of producing energy for the entire economy. This is the best solution from Poland's point of view because only a nuclear power plant will allow the country to move away from coal without the risk of power failure.
70% of the energy produced in Poland still comes from coal. Today, our main task is to maintain our energy security, to build an energy sector based on other emission-free energy sources.
But by leading the way here, there's a real opportunity to show the world what's possible, and it's an honor to be a part of it.
The Americans will provide to Poland the so-called SMRs, small modular reactors. Their key part is located underground. This technology is much smaller, cheaper, and faster to run than a classic nuclear power plant.
A reactor or a nuclear power plant simply has to be built, and this is a device that the manufacturer basically provides us in one piece, already built. It can fit on a train wagon or a big truck.
Small modular reactors are currently the most modern method of generating electricity from nuclear power, operating in only a few countries. The first company in Poland to decide to implement such a technology is Orlen. The company wants to start operating the first power plant in 2029. The construction of a large power plant is a plan for the coming years. In recent months, a location has been chosen, Choczewo, a village near the Baltic Sea. France, the United States, and South Korea want to provide Poland with the technology to build the power plant.
Russian figure skating prodigy Kamila Valieva has been at the center of a doping scandal over the last several days. While sports authorities have allowed the young athlete to continue participating in the Winter Olympics, there has been widespread confusion about the matter, and many remain unsure whether Valieva should have been allowed to compete in the first place. Here's what we know so far.
The Court of Arbitration for Sport has cleared Kamila Valieva to continue participation in the Beijing Olympics, despite having a positive test result for a banned substance. Even though the ruling was published, the case remains unresolved.
I personally, along with the World Anti-Doping Agency, are disappointed by this decision. It is a bit incomprehensible to us because it is not based on the Global Anti-Doping Codex.
Kamila Valieva made history as the first woman to land a quadruple jump in an Olympic competition. Her figure skating performance was key to the Russian team achieving the gold medal. Nevertheless, her performance was overshadowed by a doping scandal as the 15-year-old prodigy tested positive for TMZ, a heart medication which is a banned substance in sports.
And so, given that it can have that effect on a pretty important muscle in the body, I guess it could be used for performance-enhancing purposes.
The results of her test were delivered with an almost 1.5-month delay. The head of the US anti-doping agency responded.
It's either a sinister plot to continue the Russia state-sponsored cover-ups or, incompetence by leaders not to resolve a positive test going into one of the most important events of the world. And
he also emphasized that given Valieva was underage, she was most likely being abused through TMZ.
And at the heart of it is a young athlete who's potentially being abused at the hands of the Russia state or sports system.
Following Valieva being allowed to compete, several athletes and commentators have voiced their dissatisfaction with the decision.
I strongly disagree with this decision. At the end of the day, there was a positive test, and there is no question in my mind that she should not be allowed to compete, regardless of age or timing of the test results. I believe this will leave a permanent scar on our sport.
Other athletes were disappointed with the situation, but felt that the teenager should not be at blame and pointed to abuse having had taken place.
I think the whole situation is pretty sad. Overall, I think we just feel sad for that girl because she's only 15, and I really don't think that was her choice to take those drugs.
Due to the doubts still surrounding the case, the International Olympics Committee decided that Valieva and her teammates' medals would not be recognized in an ordinary fashion.
It would not be appropriate to hold the medal ceremony for the figure skating team event during the Olympic Winter Games Beijing 2022, as it would include an athlete who, on the one hand, has a positive A sample, but whose violation of the anti-doping rules has not yet been established on the other hand.
When the case is resolved in the future, if the verdict is negative for Valieva, she could be stripped of her medals even months after the events. Given her status as a protected person due to her age, however, she could only face a reprimand. Russia already has a turbulent history of doping at the Olympics, following the uncovering of a state-sponsored doping scheme at the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi. Russia was banned from the Games. The country's athletes compete as so-called neutral athletes under the Russian Olympic Committee banner.
And now, here to discuss the multitude of developments concerning the Ukraine crisis, we have Professor Przemysław Żurawski-Welgrajewski from the University of Łódź. Hello, Professor.
Hello, good evening.
Thanks for joining us tonight. It's good to see you again. Now, it looks like quite a lot has changed since yesterday. There seems to be an inkling of opportunity that we could perhaps avert a war. Vladimir Putin is now calling for the federalization of Ukraine and the return to the second, or the implementation of the second protocol of the Minsk Accords. Could you first illustrate what that would look like? And second of all, would it be acceptable to Ukraine?
I think it's a kind of political trap for Ukraine because if there is the federalization, as it is called, that means simply that Russian puppet politicians in the occupied areas would pretend to be the independent actor inside the Ukrainian political scene, thus being in a perfect position to paralyze any effort to reform the country or to move it politically to the west. This would be a perfect tool in the Kremlin's hands to achieve that goals that Moscow wants to achieve. That means to control Ukraine from the within. So it's completely unacceptable, and I don't think that the Ukrainians, who are fully aware of the situation and has a very deep knowledge about Russia, would ever agree for this kind of
right.
And in fact, blackmail.
Right. Well, they've been reluctant. They've been reluctant for years now to agree to such measure. But based on the size of the region, do you really think that the amount of representatives they would have in a federal system would really allow them to block legislation, or do you think the representation would be significant?
Yes, I think so. Since this will be only one of the tools, if it is combined with military pressure, political blackmail, energy pressure, corruption, secret services operation, that would be enough to paralyze the country. So for sure it's a mortal threat for Ukraine to agree for this kind of solution. And for what? For Russian promises? Russia have a lot of promises have made in the past. Let's start from Budapest Memorandum, where it promised not to use force against Ukraine. So in the debate with Russia, the basic thing is to make Russia to observe those agreements that have been already signed and not to invent new agreements then according to Russian imagination of what is desirable and what is not. No, first the law must be observed, and the law was violated by Russia, not by Ukraine.
Now, there's also talk about Ukraine making a self-declaration not to join NATO. According to a poll taken in December, 59% of Ukrainians want to join NATO. Now, do you think that officials in Kyiv are even do you think they're even considering making such a declaration?
I don't think so, because again, it's not the problem of whether Ukraine join NATO or not, because it was not a hot issue in international relations before Russian military concentration around Ukrainian borders. So it's not the counteract from the side of Russia that tries to prevent the imminent developments leading directly to the Ukrainian membership in NATO. It was not on the table before the crisis. So it's not about that. And it's only a tool in Russian hands not to secure Russia. Just be serious. It's ridiculous to hear that Russia needs special guarantees around its borders. It's the largest country in the world as far as territory is concerned. Whatever it's short of, it's certainly not territory to secure its peace and security. So no, it's about the Russian desire to secure the possibility to invite the neighbors and not to secure Russia from being invited from anybody, because it's completely unrealistic scenario. So no, I think Ukraine cannot capitulate in that way. It's not the problem on the table, as I have said. Nobody is talking. This is not an issue in international relations between Ukraine and NATO. There were no accession talks. Russia was forced to prevent. That was the topic invented ad hoc by Russia just to show any argument on her side to blackmail Ukraine. So any concession will not help to solve the problem. Rather, it could be something that may cover the retreat of Russia if there is a decision at Kremlin that the reaction of Ukraine itself and of the West is above Russian expectations.
Okay.
And Russia must withdraw from the entire situation, saving face. So this could be, but why at the cost of Ukraine?
All right. Well, we'll have to continue to observe the situation and see what the days ahead bring. Well, Professor, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
And that's all the time we have here on the program. Thank you for watching, everybody. And you want to stick around a little bit longer because Rock Rahan is going live from Ukraine tonight. So stay tuned.
and welcome to TVP World. We are in Kyiv, which is right now in the geopolitical spotlight. Over the weekend, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan quoted information about U.S. intelligence sources at the White House about the Russian Federation's readiness to attack Ukraine. It was supposed to take place in the hours that are right now. It was supposed to take place on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Those very words became the context of the series of today's diplomacy meetings that were held in Moscow. All of them were about Kyiv and Ukraine. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz paid a visit to Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin and addressed the news leaked to the media about alleged withdrawal of Russian troops from its positions close to Ukrainian borders. But the representatives of other foreign countries claim that no such information are being confirmed by the intelligence sources. We do have this kind of diplomatic statements. The troops that are amassed around the borders of the Ukrainian border will be undergoing further de-escalation. At least this is what Russia claims. We will be able to take further action to the issues discussed in the NATO-Russia Council, as well as bilateral relations and what was raised by the Polish chairmanship of OSCE. We are committed to the OSCE. Having said that, we stand by the territorial integrity of all OSCE member states, including Ukraine. Those were the words of Polish the Foreign Minister Zbigniew Rau, and it was the relation. That was those are the words of the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who was referring to words of Polish Foreign Minister Professor Zbigniew Rau, who paid a visit in Moscow a few hours earlier as a current president of the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe. He met Sergei Lavrov, a Russian foreign minister, and Professor Rau said following words, quote, "The situation around Ukraine remains extremely tense and threatens to escalate even further. The Polish chairmanship of the OSCE is doing everything possible to prevent it and to reduce the current tensions. In this spirit, we have proposed an initiative for a new dialogue on European security. I have presented to Minister Lavrov the logic of that project, which is treated as a priority by the Polish presidency. Its aim is to reduce the risk of confrontation and strengthen security and stability in OSCE area. We expect that this initiative will allow for better understanding of the positions of all participating countries and improved predictability of actions, as well as strengthening the three fundamental principles for peace and security in Europe. The principle of a comprehensive approach to security, the indivisibility of security, and peaceful relations between states." Those were the words of Polish Foreign Minister Professor Rau. On the other hand, Sergei Lavrov, the head of Russian Foreign Ministry, on one hand is threatening Western partners, on the other hand claims that there is still room for diplomatic talks. Sergei